When I was in my late 20s, I married a husband 5 years older than me and lived with my in-laws. My in-laws believed I was just a maid, which made for tough days for me. One day, they went on a family trip without me and brought back souvenirs for my parents. When I went to give it to my parents and was talking to them, my parents heard the words, "I'm just a maid," and became extremely furious. My parents, unable to contain their anger, hatched a plan. In front of them, I inadvertently uttered the words, "I'm just a maid." My furious parents then launched a counterattack. Should I write about that dark period in my life? Back when I was in my late 20s, and I was married to a husband 5 years my senior, we were also living with my in-laws. Living together was a first for me, and since I lived in a rural area, there are still many people with old-fashioned beliefs. I was obsessed with the idea that as a bride, I should adhere to the household customs of that family. My parents had told me to be careful about what I said, and I thought my in-laws' words were absolute, which only made things worse. Looking back now, I realize I was becoming quite a messed up person, almost brainwashed. On the first day of living together, my in-laws told me straight up, "As a bride in this house, you're basically a maid. You'll handle all household matters, while your job's salary goes into the household. Children must be boys. I won't accept girls. Producing an heir is everything. Even if you get sick, you have to cure yourself. Don't slack off on housework during that time." I was lectured for about an hour on the duties of a daughter-in-law and such. It was more like being a slave than a maid. A daughter-in-law is not a family member, but an outsider. Since daughter-in-law applies to all those who married into the family, I asked my mother-in-law, "Are you also a maid?" And then she erupted in anger like a raging fire, saying, "I gave birth to the children, so I'm definitely part of this family." She was screaming that, which didn't make any sense. Afterward, I remember being burdened with unnecessary errands, which was tough. At that time, I regretted asking my mother-in-law that insensitive question. Later on, a bank account was opened in my name, and my salary was redirected there. My mother-in-law told me she would manage it for me and took away both the checkbook and the card. Every month I was given a measly allowance of $100, but it barely covered car gas and disappeared quickly. When it came to meals, I was told to eat the leftovers and was never given a proper meal. I couldn't take it anymore that I couldn't eat properly, so I protested several times. However, I was repeatedly scolded with insults like, "How dare a maid eat the same thing as us? You don't know your place." When I went shopping for groceries, I managed to survive by buying a small amount of food for myself. I was only able to do this because my in-laws were careless with money. If they had checked the receipts and properly managed the finances, I might not be alive today. At home, I had no time to rest and was constantly forced to do housework. I went to work, came home, and did more housework. It was a never-ending cycle. Work actually felt more relaxing in comparison. Back then, my break times were the most blissful moments. Drinking warm tea while listening to my colleagues' complaints was such a relief. On top of that, a colleague who knew my family situation made me a lunchbox every day. She'd laugh and say, "It's the same effort to make 1 or 2 portions anyway." I can't express how grateful I am for her kindness. Thanks to this colleague, I was somehow able to continue working. What a great colleague. It's a treasure to meet someone like this. It's so nice to be able to casually care about others. I may not have good luck with men, but I definitely have good luck with friends. This colleague really helped me out a lot. Even now, we're getting along well, including our families. During my time living as a slave under the guise of a wife, the topic of a family trip during spring break came up. Of course, this family trip didn't include me. It was so obvious that I didn't even feel sad about it. On the first day of the break, I sent off my in-laws and husband on their trip with a smile on my face, and I greeted them with a smile when they returned on the last day. Even now, thinking back on it, it's terrifying that I thought this was normal. My mind must have been numb. I want to tell myself to wake up soon. Wow, that was some serious brainwashing, huh? Dana might be the type who is easily hypnotized. Continuing such a life can drive you crazy, right? You've managed to escape now, right? Knowing that you've escaped, reading this is still quite tough. Of course. Now that I've escaped, I feel relieved. That's why I can write about it here. Even I, having experienced it firsthand, feel scared for myself. Man, it's really intense. When my in-laws returned from their trip, they cheerfully handed me a souvenir. "Here's a souvenir for your parents' house. Take it with you." I thought in my head, how kind of my in-laws to buy a souvenir for my parents. And in my mind, it was like a daydream. I hurried back to my parents' house and gave them the souvenir.
Oh, did you enjoy your trip?
I'm a daughter-in-law, so because a daughter-in-law is like a maid, I didn't go.
Huh? Did I mishear too? Say that again, please.
My voice must have been too quiet because my mother didn't seem to hear, so I said it loudly the next time. I didn't go on the trip because I'm treated like a maid, not a family member. My parents were surprised by my statement and angry at the same time. It was strange how my parents reacted, even though nothing unusual had happened.
Next break, bring that person to this house.
While calming down my enraged father, my mother suggested something.
Since telling them to come here won't work without a reason, say we got some delicious wine and invite them over for a drink. Since we'll be drinking, plan to stay the night when you come. But also tell them to come early in the morning because there are various things we need help with.
She said it smoothly with a smile, but the fact that my mother's eyes were not smiling scared me more than my angry father. Okay, I'll ask when I get home. I think it should be fine. After giving my parents the souvenir, I left my in-laws' place early to avoid getting scolded by my mother-in-law for staying too long. I asked my husband, who was lounging lazily on the sofa, about our plans for the next day off. It seems like my parents have gotten some tasty wine in, and they've invited us over. Want to go? If you don't want to, we can decline. My husband reacts to the word wine.
Yeah, I'll go no matter what happens.
He responded immediately. Doug really loves his drinking parties. Since there's something they need help with, we'll be going early in the morning. Is that okay?
It's fine. I'm good at waking up early. Looking forward to it.
He sleeps in until noon on days off, so what's with being good at waking up early? I sighed at Doug's attitude, but managed to secure the arrangement somehow. When I informed my mother about it, she praised me, saying, "As expected, my daughter. Well done on completing the mission." And she congratulated me. Her words really lifted my spirits, even though it was just a small thing. The next day off, I took my husband to my parents' house early in the morning. My parents welcomed us with smiles. They immediately had my husband change and then took him to the cornfields beside the house. My father began explaining the work of harvesting corn to my husband, who didn't understand what was happening. My husband, who likes to show off his good side, started harvesting the corn without complaint, trying to imitate what he saw. However, he couldn't do it well, and my father had to give him guidance multiple times. Usually, we'd finish harvesting corn quickly with a harvester, but to teach my husband a lesson, my father left one section for hand cutting. It's about a half day's worth when Dad gets serious. Mom and I returned home to prepare lunch and snacks. The rest of the time, we relaxed. By evening, Dad and my husband returned after finishing the corn harvest. Later on, my husband cut the corn while Dad carried and dried it in the yard. Not used to physical labor, my husband was exhausted and sat down in the doorway. My mom kept giving him chores. He smiled and did them. My mom really knows how to handle him, flattering him to get things done. After running errands for my mother, my husband took a bath, and by the time he was ready to eat, he was tired and asleep. It's not nice to wake him up, so I laid out the futon and let him sleep. I enjoyed my mother's cooking after a long time and had a great time with my parents. Serves him right. Looks like Dana got back at her husband. After all the tough times Dana went through, she got her revenge on her husband. The next day, when it was time to return to my in-laws' house, my mother asked me to stay because she has something to do. My husband, wanting to show himself as a good husband, readily agreed. He said he would come to pick me up later, but I reassured him that my mother would drive me home. As we were about to leave, my mother handed over an envelope containing the wages for yesterday's corn harvesting. Along with it, she gave a letter to be handed over to my in-laws. My husband's mood improved after receiving his payment. With a smile, he waved goodbye and headed home. Mom, what was that errand about? I hadn't really heard the details, so I decided to ask my mother to clarify.
Errand? There's nothing like that. I'll take care of things around the house, so just relax.
While thinking she had mentioned having errands, I indulged in my mother's words and took it easy. After a few hours, the house phone rang loudly. My mother attended to it. During her conversation, she maintained a composed tone, but her words contained hints of anger. I waited for the phone call to end, wondering who it could be from. Later, I found out it was from my in-laws. Apparently, they were upset about having made my husband do things like harvesting corn and running errands yesterday. My mother calmly responded that nothing harsh was done, and since she had already paid him, there was no reason for blame. She declared that she would live with me in this house and then hung up the phone. This incident became the trigger for a discussion involving both families a few days later. A few days after that, I went to my in-laws' house with my parents. Upon entering their house, I was shocked to see it had turned into a messy room in just a few days. There was a pile of laundry, dirty dishes scattered in the sink, and stacked up lunchboxes and convenience store garbage. The inside of the room was also littered with garbage, and even though the trash can was overflowing, it hadn't been emptied. In an angry tone, my mother-in-law said, "Because you don't come home, the house is a complete mess. Why do you keep going back to your parents' place? You're married now, so your home is here, right? Clean up the house right now. Make it spotless. That's also your duty as a wife." My mother-in-law's words struck a nerve with my mother.
What do you mean by duty as a wife? You should properly take care of your own life. Don't try to push everything onto our daughter. The mess in the house isn't our daughter's fault, it's your own problem. Clean up the house right away.
My mother's angry voice echoed through the house. Frightened, my husband and father-in-law started cleaning the room. Although visibly shaken, my mother-in-law maintained her composure, unwilling to let her pride falter. Once the house was somewhat tidy, they began discussing. My in-laws insisted that my parents had caused their precious son undue mental anguish through manual labor and demanded compensation. At this point, my mother took out documents from her bag and placed them in front of my in-laws.
Please, take a look at this. This document calculates the total amount of household chores my daughter has been doing at your place and converts it into monetary value. And this here totals the salary my daughter would have earned if she hadn't been doing those chores for you all. We will be billing you for the combined amount of these two.
I recall being questioned thoroughly about the household chores I was doing at my place. Now I realize it was to compile this list. Why should we pay for chores done by the daughter-in-law? Isn't that absurd? My mother-in-law looked at my mother with a perplexed expression as she asked.
My daughter is essentially the maid of this household, right? Being a maid means she deserves a wage. Surely there hasn't been any unpaid wages, has there? Besides, no employer would deduct money earned outside from a maid. I believe she was under supervision, so can you return the total amount to my daughter in one lump sum?
Why should we have to pay money to the daughter-in-law? It's normal for a daughter-in-law to earn money outside. My mother listened to my mother-in-law's statements, smiled, but her eyes didn't reflect a smile.
If she were a daughter-in-law, that might be true, but our daughter is essentially your maid, right? Besides, it was asserted that she isn't a family member, so she's definitely a maid, isn't she? It's an employee-employee relationship, isn't it?
That's right. After this, a heated debate ensued. My mother-in-law responded to my mother's claim about the demands by simply saying it's because I'm the daughter-in-law. Both sides got heated, and towards the end, it turned into an argument over whether to pay or not. My father intervened between them.
Well, let's all cool our heads a bit. No matter how much she's married into this family as parents, we can't leave our daughter here, so we're taking her home. Our daughter is emotionally drained, so please contact us if there's anything. If you ever contact my daughter directly, I will dissolve this marriage for disrespecting us.
My mother-in-law seemed like she wanted to say something, but we left my in-law's house. So I ended up living at my parents' house. Life at my parents' house was absolute comfort. I could eat whatever I wanted, and I didn't have to go hungry. And I had free time, which had the biggest impact. My rigid thoughts gradually melted away. I wondered why I had been so obedient to my mother-in-law and husband. Of course, I also started commuting to work from my parents' house, and my colleagues were happy to hear it. They made sure to tell me not to go back to my in-laws' house. Actually, before I took my husband to my parents' house, I got a call from my mother telling me to bring all the belongings I would need for daily life. It seemed like my mother had never considered sending me back to my in-laws' house. I had no desire to go back to my in-laws' house after living away from them. One day I came home from work and remembered that I had put my phone on silent mode during a meeting. When I checked my phone, I saw that my mother-in-law had called me an insane number of times. I was still processing it when my mother-in-law called again. When I nervously answered the phone, "Why aren't you answering the phone?" I could hear my mother-in-law's voice sounding so agitated that I could almost hear her breathing heavily. "It's payday today, right? Why hasn't the salary been deposited yet? Did you quit your job? What are you doing without telling me? Oh yeah, it was payday today. I had changed the bank account for my salary deposit. I completely forgot about it. No, I don't need to give my salary to you since we don't live together anymore, right? What are you talking about? Even if we live apart, you're still part of our family, aren't you? No. It was you who said we weren't family. Even if you try to act like we're family now, it's too late. It's too convenient for you. Wait, now suddenly we're family? I've never thought of us as family, you know. That's strange. I was just a maid, right? Please take care of paying my wages. If not, I'll take legal action. I'll be waiting for your payment. My mother-in-law was huffing and puffing about something, but I hung up the phone. Since I started living at my parents' house, my mind has cleared up, and I've been able to make sound judgments. The salary deposits were also redirected to my pre-marriage account. The truth is that due to the paperwork, I can only change the payee from the next payroll. However, I knew someone who understood the situation and kindly allowed me to make the change starting from this month. In addition, I've been consulting with a lawyer and steadily preparing for divorce. When I reported the phone call from my mother-in-law to my father, he was furious again.
I told them to contact me instead, but your mother-in-law is acting like a chicken.
Because of this, my parents were utterly disgusted and began moving towards an official divorce. As a result, another discussion was scheduled. This time, my in-laws and husband were invited to my parents' house. Even though she told me not to contact her directly, I did, informing her that, as previously stated, I would proceed with ending the marriage. In response, my mother-in-law retorted that answering the phone was the wrong move. Upon those words, my mother's switch flipped again, and an argument broke out between her and my mother-in-law. Unbearable words flew back and forth between them. In the midst of this, my husband, who had been quiet until then, stood up.
What's with all this talk about divorce?
Divorce me, please.
Seriously, someone who can't even bear children like this is just a returnable item. I've been given a bad wife. She's useless. I married you because I thought you were an easy childbearing type and would give birth to as many children as possible, but I was disappointed. Ugh, what a waste of time. Just disappear from my sight.
He said all this while standing in a battle stance. His words left me and my parents flabbergasted. In the past, I would have cried and clung to my husband, begging him not to abandon me, but now I felt like the person in front of me was just messing with me. Understood. Now please sign this. I hold out the divorce papers I had prepared in front of my husband, who is standing in front of me with a pompous grin on his face.
Hey, what the? You suddenly bring out something like this?
Upon seeing the divorce paper, my husband panicked. Seems like divorce wasn't an option in his mind. But then my mother-in-law butted in again. Well, my goodness, you even prepared something like this. You're the worst kind of people. You don't even have any intention of discussing things, do you? Son, just sign it quickly already. It's probably better to cut ties with a jinx who can't even bear a child like this. Oh, mother-in-law, introducing yourselves as jinxes, huh? Verdana, you guys are the jinxes. You poor things who can't see yourselves objectively. I almost said no, I really want to introduce myself. Upon hearing those words from my mother-in-law, my husband couldn't back down anymore and signed the divorce papers. Regarding this, I mentally gave my mother-in-laws a nice assist. I didn't think we could get divorced so easily, but from then on, things were tough. We managed to sign the divorce papers easily, but we argued over compensation. We both hired lawyers and were in a situation where we were demanding compensation from each other. We had a talk, but it led nowhere. When we were deciding whether to go to court or not, I discovered that my mother-in-law had changed the PIN on the account card my in-laws set up for me without asking, and it wasn't the one I had given her. Moreover, since my mother-in-law kept my checkbook and cards, it was proven she managed my salary. Also, based on weight loss since marriage and counts from colleagues, it was evident I wasn't allowed proper meals and was harassed by my in-laws. This led to the settlement where my husband agreed to pay the amount we initially proposed. It took half a year to finalize this outcome, but I managed to recover my wages successfully. With compensation resolved, I submitted the divorce papers to the municipal office. Thus, I officially became estranged from my husband. I reclaimed myself and lived freely. It was tough, Dana. There's no other way to put it. It was nothing short of a disaster. After going through such hardships, I can only hope for happiness now. 8 years after the divorce, when I had completely forgotten about my ex-husband, I received a message from someone. It seemed my ex-husband had moved out of his parents' house and started living alone. The year after our divorce, he married a young girl. She had fair skin and a model-like figure, so beautiful that she became well known in the neighborhood. They were dubbed the Beauty and the Beast couple, and gossip spread about them. Soon after, his wife became pregnant, but it turned out the child wasn't his. Once this was discovered, they divorced immediately. About half a year later, he married another young woman. However, unable to withstand the bullying from his parents, his wife fled within 3 months. Around another 6 months later, he welcomed yet another new wife. Perhaps his parents desperately wanted a successor because they treated this new wife kindly. Thanks to that, although his wife didn't run away, they couldn't conceive a child even after 1 or 2 years. Finding this odd, they went to the hospital for tests but found nothing abnormal. At that time, upon the hospital doctor's recommendation, my ex-husband also underwent testing. There couldn't possibly be anything wrong with my son. It's the wife who's abnormal, my mother-in-law said, apparently causing quite a scene in the hospital. The result was that my ex-husband had a problem. He is unable to have children for the rest of his life. Once this became clear, his parents suddenly started favoring their younger son. Up until then, my ex-husband had been pampered as their precious eldest son, but he was suddenly ostracized by his parents. Also, due to the abusive remarks made by my mother-in-law at the hospital, his wife left home. With nowhere else to go, my ex-husband moved out of his parents' house and started living alone. All of this was revealed to me by my former brother-in-law. Actually, my ex-husband had a younger brother, but he hadn't been treated well by the patriarchal in-laws, so he had moved out when I came to live there. I met my former brother-in-law for the first time at the wedding, but surprisingly, he had been my senior colleague when I worked part-time. He took care of me from the beginning and taught me a lot, and we often went out for drinks together. After I quit my part-time job, we drifted apart, but my former brother-in-law remembered me too, so we exchanged contact information and occasionally kept in touch. Wow, it's amazing how things turn out like that. The world is smaller than you think, especially in the countryside. Yeah, in the countryside, it's like everyone knows each other's friends. Yeah, it really is a small world. My former brother-in-law is already married and has 2 children. He disliked his parents and tried to avoid them as much as possible, but when he found out about my ex-husband's infertility and his parents kept contacting him unnecessarily, he became frustrated and requested a transfer overseas. He didn't tell the in-laws. He just said to the family that he was leaving the U.S. altogether. He wanted me to be careful because my ex-husband might try to contact me. True to my ex-brother-in-law's warning, I received a message from my ex-husband. He said he wants to get back together and that I'm the only wife he can think of. I might have been excited by those words in the past, but now they just sound like empty talk to me. Besides, I am already remarried and a mother of 3. Despite the hectic pace of daily life, I can confidently say that now is the happiest time for me. I feel nervous when I try to convey this to my ex-husband. If I say the wrong thing here, I'm afraid my ex-husband might get the wrong idea and think I still have feelings for him. My ex-husband tends to misinterpret things selfishly and go off the rails, so I carefully chose my words and explained myself thoroughly to avoid any misunderstanding that I still have feelings for him. My ex-husband was so frustrated that he couldn't put it into words. He couldn't accept that I, who was like a slave-like maid, could be happier than him. The words my ex-husband managed to come up with were, "Well, you're still useless after all." I murmured, "All right," in my heart. Since my overly possessive husband made the decision himself to cut ties with me, there shouldn't be any contact from him in the future. He has a lot of pride, so if he mistakenly thinks he's the one who abandoned me, that's fine. I ended the call with my ex-husband without harboring any unnecessary resentment. Just this alone is enough. Once again, I've won. Isn't my ex-husband quite the dangerous type? He might end up on the news in a few years. Those types are easy to manipulate if you stroke their ego. Well, I wouldn't want to be around such a person. Dana, you really made a good choice in getting married. Honestly, I think I was really messed up in the past, but now everything is normal. Surrounded by a loving husband and adorable children, we laugh together every day. Thank you for listening to my story from the past. I responded to my ex-husband's contact. It was a tough story, Dana. It seems your in-laws' adherence to old beliefs led to the collapse of their family. We need to adapt our thinking to fit the times too. I hope Dana's happiness continues just like this. Traditional beliefs of male dominance and female subservience, where a wife is not considered family but exists solely to bear children. Even though my mother-in-law must have endured painful experiences being treated like this by her own mother-in-law, she did the same to me. If only she had realized she was perpetuating the same behavior as her mother-in-law and had seen her actions objectively, perhaps the outcome would have been different. Similarly, my ex-husband, raised by such parents, had his thinking distorted. In the end, he was even abandoned by his parents, likely to face a lonely end. Things considered right in one era can become wrong in another. Perhaps what's needed is a flexible mindset that can adapt to any era.